everybody. Another episode of Adventures in Mood City, Philip Hennon's Adventures in Mood City. I thought we'd have a little fun since the weather is real nasty and, well, I don't know where you're at, but in the Bay Area it's real nasty. And I'm going to try not to play here. The doctor's orders, I can't, usually I'd play you guys a little something of what we were going to do today, but they don't know what's going on. I don't know if I got carpal tunnel, which is horrible for my guitar playing, but or if I just have an injury, but we're going to try and take care of it without shooting me full of cortisone. So hopefully it won't be long. But anyway, what I wanted to do today was examine my top 10 list for the greatest soundtracks in, you know, pop music or just period in all movies. And I want, after I do my 10, I'd like you guys to give me your 10 in the comment section if you could. You know, so I'd be curious to know what everybody's thoughts would be on this. So, but I thought it'd be fun. Movies are, you know, in the beginning, movies were just kind of like background music. And I think it kind of started with Quincy Jones, where a lot of the soundtracks, it was in the, what was the first movie he did? I think The Pawnbroker, I think, was the first movie he did where he did the soundtrack. And from that point on, music could be a little bit hipper instead of just like kind of background noodling or, you know, or more classical stuff or whatever. It got, you know, a little hipper in this presentation. But whatever it is, I mean, it's all good. But just that was kind of the mark where things started to change, and soundtrack could be could it also become as big as anything else, you know, that was pop oriented. So so anyway, without further ado, I'd like to give you my my number 10 pick for the best soundtrack, and it's from a movie that I love, and I'm sure a lot of you guys love it too. So let's take a listen.
I am a man of constant sorrow. I've seen trouble all my day.
All right. I can't help but laugh a little bit when I hear that, because the movie was so funny, man. And but the soundtrack was cool. It was like a combination of bluegrass, blues, like Delta blues, and country, all combined. It took place in like Mississippi, so it was all that great music. So I really love that. Great movie too. Now number 9 was my introduction to a great musician, and that's why I love it so much. Well, I just let you play it, but I won't get into it. We'll talk a little bit with it afterwards. So this is was Jimi Hendrix, and that was the album where I first learned. I'd heard his name spoken in reverence and awe, and I'd heard some things here and there. What really wasn't paying attention, but that was the first album where I really intently listened to him and what he was about. And that concert in Monterey was in 1967, and that was after he had just kind of became famous in Europe, and this was his first concert, being a famous act in Europe, coming back to the States. So he had something to prove, and he really did. Everything was good about it, too. His voice was, you know, he never had an incredible voice, but he was on key and a lot of emotion. Really good. And that was the album. My stepfather had that album, and he had a Band of Gypsies. So Band of Gypsies showcased his lead a lot more, and just two different aspects of his musical persona, so to speak. So they were good like bookends, and I kind of filled in the rest as I went. The next, number 8, we have one of a trio of films, soundtracks that were, there were 3 comedies with the same players, and the soundtrack was just insane, sweet soul. That's what the producer of it specialized in this type of soul that I call sweet soul, or even, well, I won't give it away, but go ahead and take a listen and we'll talk about it. Take a listen.
Sometimes the rain, even when I hear the sound, like you and me, baby, getting down with the sounds around. Oh, the smell of the morning flower as we pass away the hour.
Yeah, so it was trio films. It was Uptown Saturday Night, Let's Do It Again, and A Piece of the Action. And Sidney Poitier directed those movies, and it's a shame because him and Bill Cosby were just a great comedic team. Sidney Poitier was like the straight man, but he was funny just being that straight man. So great movies and funny, and it's just a shame now that it's a little tarnished, but you know, funny is funny. But the next movie, actually, along those lines, is a great movie from the 60s, and great soundtrack, kind of bluesy. It takes place down south too, so let's take a listen.
In the heat of the night, seems like a cold sweat creeping across my brow. Yeah, in the heat of the night.
Yeah, just in the heat of the night. One of the great movies of all time. It's probably, I don't know, it'd be among my top 5 favorite movies of all time. Just love the movie. It was odd because the movie actually was filmed in 1967, and after they didn't even film it in Mississippi, from what I hear, because Sidney didn't want to go down. He had had experience in Mississippi earlier, where him and Harry Belafonte had taken down some money for the SNCC workers down in Mississippi. This was in 1964 when things weren't cool at all. And they landed in a Jackson airport, like a little small Jackson airport at midnight or something. And when they got there, Sidney was relieved because he saw a whole bank of lights in the background. And he said, oh great, so there's FBI's here, you know, laugh, laugh. But the brother that was driving them said, no, that's not the FBI, that's the Klan. And so they were basically chased all the way into, I don't know what county they were into, but it was a hell ride. And him and Harry Belafonte were like silent in the back. And while this guy that knew the ropes and where to go got out of the situation without anybody being hurt. But, you know, back then it could have very easily been something horrible. But anyway, Sidney didn't want to go through that again. So they filmed it in Virginia. And it just was funny because in 1967 things were changing, and the movie kind of documents that. It's like, you know, when some things happen, they don't know what to, you know, like when Sidney Poitier slapped the old racist white guy, you know, the sheriff doesn't know what to do, you know what I mean? And then maybe a few years older, if it was a different sheriff, you know, Sidney could have been shot or something. So it was a very interesting film because it actually, the year it was filmed, actually was documented in that actual time period in the movie too. So interesting, great movie too. My next film is one of the great heroes of the 70s when I was a little kid, and still is just like just a legend now. You know, everyone still talks about him, you know, whatever, 50 years later, 40 years later. So anyway, take a listen. Yeah, that's the great Bruce Lee. And man, those movies, man, you'd go in and you'd come out and just feel like you were ready to challenge anybody, you know. Little kid, it would hype you up so much, man. He was so bad. And people still argue about it to this day, and it's just amusing, man. Because he was one of the few guys that he was like a genius at martial arts. And so it wasn't like he was just an actor. He actually was a martial artist first. Even invented his own style. So he wasn't, you know, Claude Van Damme or Steven Seagal. This guy was really, really talented too. So for number 5, this is a soundtrack that I just always had. I remember I remember like a handful of albums I had at the house. A couple of them were gifts. Like I had a couple of the Temptations albums. But this album was just there, and I ended up really loving the album, and I'm glad I did because it broadened my horizon and made me, well, going to Berkeley did that anyway, but it made me appreciate different styles of music, and you know, you learn that very early, it just stays with you. So take That's the great John Lennon, the Beatles. That was from the album Help, and I don't think I've ever seen the movie actually. I just love the soundtrack, and that's my favorite song from the soundtrack. You Have to Hide Your Love Away. Hella people have covered that. It's just a great song. I think John Lennon was influenced kind of off of Dylan a little bit on that track, a little Dylan-esque. But anyway, my next soundtrack album was really groundbreaking in its length, duration of not necessarily the film, but on the soundtrack itself, and just the use. We talked about movies getting hipper and hipper. Well, this kind of did the trick. So take a listen.
Who's the black private dick that's a sex machine to all the chicks? You're damn right. Who is the man that would risk his neck?
Yeah, that was Richard Roundtree and Shaft, and that was directed by the great Gordon Parks. It was groundbreaking. That was like one of the first, Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song was actually the starting point of what we call black exploitation films of the 70s. They actually were just films where, like action films where the leading man was black and he was, kind of kicking ass, so that was kind of unheard of at the time. So it was a real groundbreaking thing. But Shaft played a detective, real cool detective in the film, and it came after Melvin Van Peebles saw Melvin Van Peebles' film, which was more of an art house film, but it reached a broad audience. But this was actually a big budgeted, like a Hollywood film, so a little bit different. But this was like those two movies really kind of gave the start to this trend in movies. Number 3, you all know, and I don't care what anybody says, this album it was really bad. It was a craze, the happening of style of music, and it kind of got there's variations on it, and I'm not going to get too heavy in it, but just take a listen. You'll see what I'm talking about. Take a listen. Number 3. So that was Saturday Night Fever, and I actually, I saw the movie a few weeks ago. Actually, and, man, it still holds up. It's a good movie, man. It wasn't just like a cheesy disco movie. It was actually had a good story, real great performances, and just from what I hear, they intended it to be kind of typical art house films. They thought it was going to be just that, like an art house film, and I think disco was kind of dying out, so it was kind of like a underground thing, and then it blew up, and it kind of started all over again, for better or worse. But the music on there was great, good representation, and the Bee Gees, man, they I don't care what anyone said, they were great producers and writers, man. Very distinct falsettos too, but great writers and producers, and the movie. Really good. Great slow songs and great fast songs, man. I could leave Staying Alive. I had enough of that song, but the other tracks were just pretty well done. Pretty well done. Number 2, we all know this, just phenomenal soundtrack album to a pretty great rock and roll movie. So take I can't go on about that enough, man. It came after my favorite Prince album was actually 1999, but this is the album that really broke him wide, and with a good reason. It was a great album too. And at that point, he was always surprised me. Each album was I didn't know where he was going to go or what surprises he was going to have. So it was a real treat. That was like the Beatles, Stevie Wonder kind of had that thing where you never knew what they were going to do next artistically, you know. So great album to a pretty great, you know, Prince's movies after that weren't that great, but that particular movie was really good. Okay, coming in at number 1. This movie and this soundtrack really just changed the game, and it's one of those soundtracks which was just as good, and this is a rarity. It was just as good as a standalone album. It would have been one of the great albums of the 70s just by itself, but it happened to be attached to this movie that was the soundtrack was actually better than. But anyway, I won't go into it. You guys take a listen. We'll talk about it. All right, take a listen.
It is dead. That's what I said. Let the man rap a plan, said he'd send him home, but his hope wasn't wrong, and he should have known. It's hard to understand.
That's actually the second album on here. Let's Do It Again was done by Curtis Mayfield too. I don't think I said that. But Curtis Mayfield did a lot of great soundtracks. Another one was Claudine he did in the 70s. Just great soundtracks, man. That were great, that featured great songwriting. It wasn't just background music. The songs themselves were really, really good. And this album, it wasn't a misstep in the whole album. I mean, it just was, like I said, it could be by itself and just be a great album. That it was adjacent to this movie, it was interesting. I heard that Curtis Mayfield, since the movie was about a drug dealer, a coke dealer basically, Curtis Mayfield intentionally wrote an album that kind of told of the perils of being, you know, where the movie was kind of maybe glamorizing it a little bit, making it hip. This movie was showing you in song form the pitfalls of a career in dope dealing. So, but anyway, that's my top 10. And I'd be curious to know your top 10. There's a whole lot of great movies out there. It was hard for me to make this list. I had to go back and forth a little bit, but that's it. So why, in the comment section, please give me your top 10 lists of your greatest soundtracks. Top 10. All right. Great. Love y'all. And please press the subscribe button and hit the bell so you'll be notified when there's new content up. Okay. All right. Love y'all.